Welcome to this episode of Orthodontics in Summary. Today's episode is looking at the Posterior Bolton's analysis. Now, this is a new perspective on the established Bolton's discrepancy. This was put forward by Patrick Foley and his team, and he's carried out some research in this domain. It was an excellent lecture given at this year's AAO. Bolton's discrepancy, looking at the mesial distal widths of the anterior 6 teeth and the overall analysis. Patrick Foley put forward is that an anterior two-size discrepancy may be masked by a posterior two-size discrepancy. And really that's where his research question started. What is the posterior Bolton's discrepancy? Well, the formula is relatively simple. It's the addition of the mandibular first and second premolars and the first molar divided by the maxillary first, second premolars and first molar times by 100. Now, going back and looking at the original data from Wayne Bolton's classic study, the outcome comes at 105.3%. Now, Mesial in 2021 then looked at 55 cases which had ideal outcomes to ratify this information. They looked at digital casts and they concluded that actually the ratios were very similar to that data gathered from Bolton's original study. What I like about Patrick Foley's lecture is that he then put this posterior Bolton's discrepancy that him and his team had established and applied it to different clinical settings. And they looked at extractions of posterior teeth. They looked at extraction of first premolars, as well as extractions of upper first premolars and lower second premolars. That's Mesial 2021 and Holton 2023, to see what effects this had on the established 105% of posterior Bolton's discrepancy. Well, what they found is that the posterior discrepancy increased following extractions of premolars. It went up to either 107% for extraction of first premolars and 106.5% when it came to upper first premolars and lower second premolars. And that was then putting the teeth into an ideal position when it came to the occlusion. What was interesting, when they looked at their own cases, they found from the study that the observed posterior Bolton's discrepancy was actually much higher than the ideal at around 110%. Patrick Foley and his team then went to explore where does this discrepancy then emerge to help us answer the question of what to do to manage it. And actually there was a space, and that space was reliably between the lower first molar and the adjacent premolar. It was between 1.1 and 1.2 millimeters, and that was in the mandibular arch. In fact, only one patient in the study did not have any spaces in their posterior segment. So how do we manage this space? Well, we can think about compromising the occlusion. And what Patrick Foley mentioned is that we can either set the tone from the front of the mouth or from the back of the mouth. At the back, we can either go for class 1 molars and accept a slightly class 2 canine and incise the relationship. Or we can set the tone from the front, go for class 1 incisors and canines and a slightly class 3 molar relationship. There's always the option for interproximal reduction in the upper posterior segments to create an equal sized proportion of teeth, but also bonding is available as well. There's a series of cases presented to exemplify the posterior Bolton's ratio and showing an increase in that discrepancy when it came to carrying out extractions. What I enjoyed about this lecture was the clinical application of this analysis, looking at common scenarios of extractions and then describing its management of it. And it boils down to the conclusion that actually our initial analysis will then be able to help us dictate what the outcomes are. I think this is quite a powerful formal tool to now have, and I hope with the advancement of digital analysis, this becomes a click of a button to find out this information. And what Patrick did suggest is that the overall Bolton's analysis doesn't really hold much meaningful clinical application of that outcome. However, the anterior and posterior Bolton's discrepancy does have outcomes which can be clinically enacted. I think this is a really powerful thing to take forwards, and actually rather than being suspicious of a posterior discrepancy, but then in clinical engagement with the patient, it's too late to make a decision. This way we can perhaps preempt that process and plan accordingly, whether we compromise, interproximal reduction, or carry out bonding for that patient. An excellent lecture and insightful work by Patrick Foley and his team. quick update for me. We had our interproximal reduction course just last weekend, and we've been working with website developers to move the course online as well. Hopefully that launches at the end of this year. We're really excited for it. As always, please do subscribe and look forward to the next episode.